They called me unmarriageable long before I truly understood what that meant. At first, it was just whispers at the edge of drawing rooms and church pews, the way mothers looked at me and then quickly looked away, the way young men pretended not to notice my presence at all. But after 12 rejections in 4 years, the words stopped being rumor and became reality. I was 22 years old, and even I had started to believe them. My name is Elellanena Whitmore. I was born in 1834 at Whitmore Estate in the Piedmont region of Virginia, 5,000 acres of rolling hills, tobacco fields stretching toward the Blue Ridge Mountains, and a red brick house my grandfather built in 1790. The house was all elegance and order, white columns, polished floors, chandeliers imported from France. Enough rooms that my father and I could go days without seeing each other, if we chose. From the outside, it was the picture of Southern respectability. Inside, it held the story of a girl the world decided was broken, thought my mother. Catherine died 3 days after I was born, taken by childbed fever before she ever held me properly. My father, Colonel Richard Whitmore, never remarried. Instead, he raised me himself with a strange mixture of distant affection and rigid determination. He did not treat me like other Southern girls. While they were learning embroidery and polite piano pieces, I was learning Latin verbs and Greek declensions. He taught me to read ledgers, calculate profits, and discuss philosophy and politics as if one day I might sit beside him in his study as a partner, not a daughter. His plan, however, was not for me to run the estate alone, but to marry well, to use my education as bait for an intelligent, wealthy husband who would value a clever wife. That plan shattered when I was 8 years old. I remember the day with painful clarity, the bright Virginia sun, the dust in the air, the proud feeling of sitting atop a horse that was too spirited for my small body. I had begged my father to let me ride that animal. I wanted to prove I was brave. He agreed, against his better judgment. Halfway across a field, a snake slid through the grass. The horse spooked, reared, and threw me backward. I hit a fallen log with my spine. There was a sharp crack, and for a moment I could not breathe. The doctors came from Richmond and then from as far as Philadelphia. They prodded my limbs, asked if I could feel their touch, exchanged grave looks over my small, rigid body. At last they gave my father their verdict. The damage was permanent. I might feel a little, I might move a little, but I would never walk normally again. No running, no dancing, no standing gracefully at a husband's side. For the rest of my life, I would depend on a wheelchair to move anywhere beyond the edge of my bed. Thought my father did what he could. He commissioned the finest chair money could buy: mahogany frame, smooth wheels, leather seat that glided silent across our polished floors. He had ramps built where there were steps and widened doorways so I could pass easily from room to room. He moved my bedroom downstairs so I would not be carried up and down the grand staircase like a piece of luggage. He hired tutors so my education would not end with my ability to walk. In his own way, he tried to build a world where I could still exist with dignity, but he could not remake Virginia society. By 14, when girls my age were flirting on porches and exchanging shy glances with potential suitors, I sat at home with my books, listening to laughter drift in through open windows. By 16, when my peers were showing off engagement rings and whispering about wedding dresses, I watched them from afar, like someone looking through glass at a life she could not touch. I learned to be grateful for my mind because it seemed to be the only thing anyone allowed me to have. No one expected me to dance, but no one expected me to be desired either. At 18, my father's worry began to show. His hair had gone grayer, his shoulders a little more bowed. One evening in his study, he spoke the words I had been dreading. He told me he was concerned about what would happen to me after his death. The estate was prosperous, but the law cared nothing for my abilities. As a disabled, unmarried woman, I would have no proper claim to the land. Our male relatives would inherit, and my future would depend entirely on their generosity. You need protection, he said. A husband who will care for you, manage things when I'm gone. I tried to argue. I reminded him that he had taught me to manage accounts, to understand crops and seasons, to read the rhythms of the land. I told him I could do what any man he might choose could do, at least from the vantage of my chair. His expression softened, but his voice remained firm. You know that is not how society works, Eleanor, he said quietly. A woman alone was a scandal. A disabled woman alone was unthinkable. In his mind, I needed a husband, not because I lacked a mind, but because the world refused to recognize that mind without a man's name beside it. The first suitor appeared soon afterward, Thomas Aldrich, a tobacco planter from Lynchburg. 35, solidly built, well-dressed, and very conscious of how he appeared to others. He toured our fields with my father and praised the quality of the land. That evening, they brought him into the parlor to meet me properly. I watched his eyes travel across the room, the chandeliers, the fireplace, the bookshelves, and then me sitting in my wheelchair. The moment his gaze dropped from my face to the chair, something shuddered behind his expression. My father spoke of my education, of my languages, of my skill with accounts. Mr. Aldrich nodded politely, then asked to speak to my father in private. I sat in the parlor and listened to the murmur of voices from the study. I did not need to hear the words to know the result. When my father returned alone, his face told me everything. Mr. Aldrich has declined, he said simply. He tried to soften it, but the truth hung between us. I was not the right kind of wife. I could not walk into church on his arm. I could not decorate his social standing the way a perfect-bodied bride could. More men followed over the next years. A widower with 3 small children who claimed he needed a mother who could manage them physically. A man who worried aloud about how a bride in a chair would look walking, or rather, rolling down the aisle. Others did not speak so plainly, but their excuses all circled the same unspoken center. My legs, my chair, the rumor that my injury meant I might never bear children. I tried to correct those rumors, emphasizing that the doctors had told us my ability to conceive was unaffected. But gossip traveled faster than letters, and once society decided you were broken, no amount of truth could fully mend your reputation. By the time I was 22, my father had arranged 12 proposals. Every single one of them ended with a refusal. Some men were polite in their cruelty. Others were blunt enough to let the word useless hang in the air like smoke. Each rejection carved another line into my understanding of myself. The world did not see my mind, my education, my determination. It saw only a crippled woman in a wheelchair, damaged goods. A burden, a problem to be avoided. And yet, I did not know that every no was pushing my life toward something no one in Virginia society could have imagined. A desperate father's radical decision. An enslaved man everyone called a brute, and a love story that would begin the moment he walked through my parlor door. But on those nights alone in my downstairs bedroom, staring at the ceiling, I knew only this. Society had judged me unmarriageable, and if there was a future for me, it would not come from the world as I had always known it. The 12th rejection did more than wound my pride. It broke something inside my father. I saw it the night William Foster, the last suitor, climbed into his carriage and rode away without looking back. My father returned to his study and sat in silence, staring at the bourbon glass in front of him without touching it. He looked older than I had ever seen him, defeated in a way no business crisis, no drought, no failed harvest had ever managed. Father, you can stop now, I said softly from my chair. I don't need 13 proposals. He exhaled a long, tired breath. 12 men in 4 years, Elellanena. 12. His voice was flat, empty of its usual command. And every single one of them made it clear they believe you are not worth marrying. The words hit me harder than any fall ever had. Not because I didn't know it, but because hearing it spoken aloud by the man who had fought the hardest for me made it real, in a way that felt final. I told him I didn't need a husband. I could stay with him, help manage the estate, live my life where I belonged. He shook his head, his eyes suddenly sharp with fear. You don't understand. When I die, the law will take this place from you. Women cannot inherit in their own right, not unmarried women, and certainly not one society believes cannot fend for herself. He explained what would happen in painful detail. The estate would pass to my cousin Robert. Robert, who barely tolerated me during family visits. Robert, who would see me as an inconvenience, a mouth to feed, a burden to be discarded as soon as decency allowed. At best, he would send me to a boarding house in Richmond or Baltimore alone, helpless, dependent on the small allowance he deigned to spare. At worst, he might choose something far colder. Leave me the estate in your will, I said desperately. Surely there must be a way. He shook his head again. Virginia law does not care what I want. It cares only that you are an unmarried, disabled woman. The law believes you must be protected by a husband or male relative. You cannot stand alone, even if you are clever enough to run this estate better than half the men in the county. Silence fell between us, thick, suffocating. I looked at the polished floor, at my hands resting uselessly in my lap, at the bourbon glass reflecting the lamplight. What do you suggest? I asked finally. He rubbed his face, exhausted. I don't know, but I will not leave you unprotected. I expected him to begin searching again for suitors, widening his reach even further, perhaps even lowering his standards to desperate levels. Instead, 4 weeks later, he summoned me to his study with a tone that made my stomach twist. His decision was already made. I could see it in the set of his jaw, the hard line of his mouth. Eleanor, he said quietly, I have found a solution. I braced myself, and then he spoke the most shocking words of my life. I am giving you to Josiah. For a moment, the name meant nothing. Then the image formed in my mind, that towering blacksmith, the enslaved man everyone called the brute. Josiah, the blacksmith? Yes, my father said. Josiah will be your husband. The world seemed to tilt. I stared at him, speechless, certain I had misheard. Father, he is enslaved. I know, he said. And he is the only man who can truly protect you. His logic poured out in measured, determined sentences. No white man would have me, not with my legs, not with the rumors about my womb, not with the stain of 12 rejections behind me. No white man would stand beside me without resentment or shame. But Josiah, 7 feet tall, strong enough to lift a horse's flank, disciplined, intelligent, gentle despite his size, could care for me. He could carry me when the chair failed. He could guard me from cruel relatives. He could do the physical work my body could not, and he will not abandon you, my father said, because the law binds him to you. It was horrifying logic, brutal, real. You treated me like property, I whispered. You are handing me to a slave as if I were a piece of furniture. He slammed his hand on the table, voice breaking. I am trying to save your life. I flinched, not from fear, but from the anguish in his voice. For 4 years I followed society's rules, he said, and society rejected you. Now I must think beyond society. I won't have you discarded like an unwanted parcel when I die. His words echoed through my chest. He was desperate. He was terrified. And he was trying in the only way he believed left to protect the daughter he loved. I want to meet him, I said, finally. I want to speak to Josiah before I give you an answer. He nodded. I'll bring him tomorrow. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, imagining the enormous man from the forge, his scarred hands, his bowed head, his strange mixture of silence and strength. Could I live with him? Could he live with me? What would such a union even mean? But beneath all the questions was one cold, unwavering truth. My options were running out, and as dawn crept into my room, one thought took shape, terrifying but undeniable. If the world had no place for me as a wife, perhaps the answer truly lay outside the world's rules. Perhaps the man society called a brute was the only man capable of giving me a life at all. Tomorrow, I would meet him. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, I waited in the parlor, hands cold, heart thudding, listening for the footsteps of the man who might become my husband. The room smelled faintly of fireplace ash and lemon polish, but even familiar comfort could not steady my nerves. Every creak of the floorboards made my breath catch. I had never been so afraid of meeting another person in my life. Then I heard it. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Waited. My father entered first. Behind him came a shadow that grew larger and larger until it filled the doorway entirely. Josiah ducked to enter. Actually ducked. He was enormous, 7 feet tall if he was an inch, wide enough across the shoulders to make the parlor door frame look narrow. His shirt strained across his chest, sleeves rolled up to reveal thick, scarred arms. His hands that could bend iron were clasped in front of him, as if he feared they might break something by accident. His skin was dark, weathered by forge heat, and his beard framed a face that might have intimidated any man who met him outdoors. But his eyes did not match the rest of him. They darted nervously across the room, never landing too long on me, never rising high enough to show defiance. He kept his head bowed. He stood like a man used to being punished for taking up too much space. "Josiah," my father said. "This is my daughter, Elellanena." Josiah's eyes flicked toward me for half a second brown. Gentle, startled, then dropped to the floor again. "Yes, sir," he murmured. His voice was soft, unexpectedly soft. A deep rumble made careful and quiet. Like a large man trying not to frighten a bird, my father explained the arrangement plainly. That Josiah would be responsible for my care and protection, for my well-being, for my life, essentially. I swallowed and forced myself to ask, "Josiah, do you understand what my father is proposing?" He risked another quick glance. That glance was filled with confusion, fear, obedience, and something deeper, resignation. "Yes, miss. The colonel says unto your husband, I am to protect you, help you. That is what he told me." His voice trembled slightly on the word husband. "And you agreed to this?" I pressed now. He looked lost. "Truly lost. Miss, I am a slave. What I want doesn't matter." The honesty hit like a slap. It wasn't self-pity. It was a fact of his world. My father cleared his throat. "Perhaps you two should speak privately." He stepped out and closed the door behind him, leaving me alone with the largest man I had ever seen, and the most fragile moment of my life. The silence stretched. Josiah stood like a statue carved from fear and muscle. "Please, sit," I said. He glanced at the delicate parlor chair and shook his head slightly. "I don't think that chair would hold me, miss." He wasn't wrong. The sofa, then. He moved carefully, lowering himself onto the edge. Even so, the wooden frame groaned under his weight. He sat with his huge hands on his knees, shoulders hunched, trying to make himself smaller for my sake. And then he asked the question that told me more about him than anything else. "Miss, are you afraid of me?" I paused, not because I didn't know the answer, but because the truth was complicated. Should I be? I asked softly. He shook his head. "No, miss. I would never hurt you." Something in his voice told me that promise was sacred to him. "I've heard they call you the brute," I said cautiously. Josiah flinched, a subtle wince. "But unmistakable. Yes, miss," he said quietly. "Because of my size. Because I look frightening." He swallowed. "But I'm not brutal. Not unless someone deserves it." There was pain in that answer. Shame, too. I needed to know more. Much more. My future might depend on this man. "Josiah," I said gently, "I want to understand you. If we are to live together, I need to know who you are." He lifted his eyes just enough for me to see a flicker of vulnerability. "I don't know what to say, miss." So I asked him something that my father had hinted at. "Can you read?" His entire body tensed. His eyes widened with fear. Teaching an enslaved person to read was illegal. Admitting literacy could cost him everything. He hesitated. A long, quiet moment stretched before he finally said, "Yes, miss. I can read. A little. Who taught you?" "No one. I taught myself. From old newspapers, scraps, whatever I found." "Reading?" He struggled for words. "Reading is like seeing other worlds I'll never walk into. Thoughts I wouldn't have otherwise." I felt a pull in my chest, something warm, unexpected. "What do you read?" He seemed surprised by the question. "Shakespeare." I borrowed a copy from the library at night, when no one was awake. My eyebrows rose. "Which plays?" "Hamlet." Romeo and Juliet, and The Tempest is my favorite. His voice, though quiet, gained a spark, a tiny flame of passion buried under years of silence. He spoke of Prospero and Ariel, but especially of Caliban. People call Caliban a monster, Josiah said, but he is a man whose home was stolen, whose freedom was taken. They call him savage, but it's Prospero who enslaves him. He paused. Sometimes the ones called monsters are the ones being hurt, not the ones doing harm. My breath caught. This was not a brute. This was a man with a mind sharp as a blade, a soul bruised but unbroken. We talked for 2 hours. Shakespeare, ideas, freedom, loneliness, what it felt like to be discarded by society. By the time the door opened again, something inside me had shifted. I no longer saw a giant filling the room. I saw a gentle, intelligent man trapped in a world, determined to misunderstand him. As Josiah stood to leave. Bowing his head again, I whispered, "Josiah, I don't think you were a brute." He stopped. He looked at me, really looked at me, and his eyes filled with something raw and grateful. "Thank you." "Miss," he said softly. I wasn't ready to admit it yet. Not even to myself. But in that moment, for the first time in my adult life, I felt a quiet spark of something I had thought I would never feel. Hope, a dangerous, impossible hope. The arrangement became official on April 1st, 1856, without celebration, without music, without the legitimacy of a wedding. Enslaved people could not marry under the law, and a white woman marrying a black man was beyond imagination in Virginia. Yet my father gathered the house staff in the main hall and announced that Josiah would now be responsible for my care, my safety, and my daily well-being. It was not a marriage society would recognize, but inside the walls of Whitmore Estate. A new chapter of my life began with a mixture of fear, awkwardness, and quiet uncertainty. A room beside mine was prepared for Josiah, connected by a private door, but separate enough to maintain the illusion of propriety. He brought only a few possessions from the slave quarters, worn clothes, a handful of secretly collected books, and tools from the forge. Suddenly, the man everyone feared was living just steps from me, close enough that I could hear him walking, breathing, existing in a space that had always belonged only to me. The first weeks were unbearably awkward. I was used to being dressed, lifted, washed, and attended by women maids who knew how to preserve my sense of dignity despite my dependence. Josiah, who had spent years shaping iron with brute strength, now had to learn how to fasten delicate clasps, adjust ribbons, and lift me without startling me. But he approached each task with a gentleness that never matched his massive frame. He always asked permission before touching me. He always looked away when modesty required it. And when something was uncomfortable or embarrassing, he moved slowly and thoughtfully, as if determined never to make me feel small. Watching him navigate my needs with such care made something warm and unfamiliar settle in my chest. We fell into a rhythm quickly. Mornings began with Josiah helping me dress, then carrying me to breakfast if the chair could not manage the threshold. After breakfast, he returned to the forge. My father still relied on his skill, and I spent my hours in the library balancing accounts and managing correspondence. Even this division of labor felt strangely symbolic. He used strength. I used mind. But in the afternoons, when the forge quieted and the sun cast long shadows across the estate, Josiah returned, and those hours slowly became the heart of each day. I would sit by the forge watching him work, his hammer rising and falling in precise rhythm, sparks bursting around him like tiny stars. Sometimes he would explain the process, his rough voice warming as he described the way iron bent and obeyed under heat. Other times he would read to me, stumbling at first, then growing more confident as I corrected him gently. Evenings became our shared sanctuary. We would talk for hours about his childhood on a different plantation, about the mother he barely remembered, about the loneliness that had settled into him like a second skin. And I told him things I had never spoken aloud to anyone, how the accident had made me feel trapped in my own body, how the rejections had carved away at my sense of worth. How I sometimes felt like a ghost in my own home. We were two people the world had dismissed he as property. I as a burden, yet in those conversations we found a strange equality, a mutual understanding of what it meant to be unseen. Then came the day everything shifted. I was watching him at the forge, fascinated by the glow of the metal under the heat. The air smelled of smoke and hot iron, and the sound of hammering seemed to vibrate through my bones. A sudden impulse seized me. "Do you think I could try?" I asked, surprising even myself. Josiah looked up sharply. "Try what?" he asked. "Forge work. I want to hit the iron." He shook his head immediately. "Miss, it's dangerous. It's hot. You could hurt yourself." But I met his eyes steadily. I had lived 14 years being told what my body couldn't do. I wanted to try something it could. After a long moment, he nodded and adjusted the setup, choosing a lighter hammer, heating a smaller piece of iron, positioning my chair close enough that I could reach without risking the fire. My first strike barely dented the iron. The second was a little stronger. By the fifth, sweat stung my eyes, my arms trembled, and my muscles burned, but I was doing something I had never done before. When the metal cooled, Josiah held it up, a small, crooked piece, nothing special to anyone else. "Your first project," he said softly. "You made this?" I felt tears spill down my cheeks, tears of triumph, not pain. For the first time since my childhood, I felt strong. Not because of my legs, but because of my spirit, my effort, my will. Josiah watched me with an expression I couldn't name, something between pride and tenderness. From that day on, the forge became our refuge. I learned to make small items, hooks, simple tools, decorative shapes. Josiah learned patience in teaching me. And in those hours, something gentle and extraordinary began to grow between us. Not love, not yet, but respect, trust, and a quiet closeness that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with choice. We were still strangers in many ways, but those days at the forge slowly turned us into something more, two lives beginning to weave themselves together. Thread by unlikely thread, in a world that had no space for such a bond out by June. The awkwardness between us had softened into something warm, something familiar and something far more dangerous. It happened slowly, quietly, without either of us admitting what was forming. It happened in the gentle tone Josiah used when he asked if I was comfortable, in the way he carefully lifted me from my chair, as if I were precious, not fragile. It happened in the hours we spent in the library, reading lines of poetry or Shakespeare aloud, his deep voice filling the corners of the room like a soft drum beat. And it happened in the forge, where my hands weak but determined learned rhythms beside his strong, practiced ones. One evening, it was poetry that betrayed us. We sat in the library with the windows open, letting in the warm Virginia breeze. Josiah was reading John Keats, his voice slow and thoughtful. "A thing of beauty is a joy forever." The lamp cast a golden glow on his face as he read, the words lingering in the air. "Do you believe that?" I asked when he finished. "That beauty lasts forever?" He stared at the page for a moment, then closed the book gently. "I think beauty in memory lasts," he said, "even if the thing itself changes or fades. We remember it the way we first saw it." Something in his tone made my breath catch. "And the most beautiful thing you've ever seen?" I asked lightly, almost teasing, never expecting his answer. He hesitated. A long pause. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You." My heart stumbled. "Me?" He cleared his throat, embarrassed. "Yesterday. At the forge. You were covered in soot, your hair was falling from its pins, and you were laughing while you tried to hammer that nail. You looked," he swallowed, "beautiful." I was stunned and speechless in a way I had never been. No man had ever called me beautiful without hesitation, without politeness, without pity. Josiah had said it without obligation, without expectation, only truth. "I'm sorry, miss," he added quickly. "I shouldn't have said that. It wasn't proper." I wheeled forward, my fingers trembling. "Say it again." He looked up, startled. "Please," I whispered. "Say it again." "You are beautiful," he murmured. "Always have been." Something inside me broke open, something tight and lonely that had lived in me for 14 years. I reached out and touched his hand. His hands, scarred and enormous, could have crushed mine. Instead, he held my fingers like something fragile and precious. "Do you see me, Josiah?" I asked. "Truly see me?" He nodded. "I see the woman who learned Greek because she was curious. The woman who reads philosophy for pleasure. The woman who learned to forge iron despite legs that don't listen to her. I see the strongest person I've ever known." The room felt too small, too charged, too full of truth. "Then hear my truth," I whispered. I think I'm falling in love with you." For a moment he froze, every muscle gone rigid. Not out of fear of me, but of the world outside that door. "Elellanena, we can't. Why?" "Because if anyone finds out, they will destroy us both." He was right. What we felt was illegal, immoral in the eyes of the South, punishable by violence or death. But in that quiet room, surrounded by books that spoke of love, tragedy, and impossible choices, danger felt distant. "Love does not care what the world allows," I said, "and I don't care what people think anymore." He looked at me with such tenderness, it almost hurt. "You deserve a life without fear, a safe life." "I deserve love," I said, "and I choose you." His breath shook. "I have loved you since the first night we spoke," he confessed. "When you asked me about Shakespeare and listened to my answer like it mattered, I never thought I could say it." "Say it now," I whispered. "I love you." The words were like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He leaned forward slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. Our lips met softly, cautiously, then fully as months of longing ignited into a kiss that felt both forbidden and inevitable. It was my first kiss. His too, in many ways. A moment that felt like a beginning and a danger all at once. After that, our lives split into two layers. By day in public, Josiah was careful and reserved. He never looked at me too long, never let anyone suspect the depth between us. By night, in the privacy of my room or the quiet library, we were simply two people in love. Two souls society had thrown away, finding each other in the shadows. We hid our affection behind silence. We hid our smiles behind lowered eyes. But alone, we spoke freely. We dreamed. We wondered what a future might look like beyond the borders of Virginia. We dared to imagine a life where our love wasn't a crime. But love makes people careless. And the more we hid, the more we forgot who else lived in that house. We thought we were safe. We thought no one would notice. We thought our secret world was ours alone. We were wrong. Deeply, dangerously wrong. And the day my father discovered us would change everything. For 5 months, Josiah and I lived in a fragile, hidden world, half dream, half defiance. We loved quietly, carefully, secretly. We memorized the rhythm of each other's footsteps, the whispers of the house, the hours when servants moved elsewhere. We learned when the hallways were empty, when the library stood silent, when my father was in town or asleep. We built our stolen hours like a fragile shelter, believing it would hold. Believing we could hide something as bright, as powerful, as impossible as love. We were wrong that it happened on a cold December afternoon, the 5th/10th of 1856. The wind rattled the windows, and the house was unusually still. I was in the library with Josiah, lost in the warmth of his arms. In a kiss that had begun with laughter and deepened into something tender and consuming. We didn't hear the footsteps. We didn't hear the door. When my father spoke, it was not a shout. That made it far more terrifying. "Elellanena." His voice was ice. We froze. Josiah pulled away from me instantly, dropping to his knees as if struck. I sat trembling in my chair, my lips still warm from his kiss, my heart plummeting into my stomach. My father stood in the doorway, his expression a storm of shock, rage, betrayal, and something more complex that I couldn't name. I opened my mouth, desperate to explain, but no sound came. "You," he whispered, staring at me as if he hardly recognized his own daughter. "You are in love with him." Not a question. A verdict. Josiah spoke first, his voice shaking. "Sir, this is my fault. I should never. Silence, my father snapped. Not another word. My father turned to me with a look that pierced through my bones. Eleanor, answer me. Are you in love with this slave? The air left my lungs. I had one chance. One lie could save Josiah's life. One denial could erase everything between us. That lie hovered on my tongue, ready, easy, safe, but I looked at Josiah kneeling, terrified, willing to take the blame for me, and I could not say it. Yes, I said. I love him, and he loves me. Josiah's head dropped as if the words physically struck him. My father recoiled as if I had slapped him. His jaw clenched. You shame yourself. You shame this house? I'm not ashamed, I whispered. My voice trembled, but the truth inside it did not. The only shame would be denying it. My father's face twisted not just with anger, but with fear. Do you have any idea what would happen to you both if this becomes known? He said in a low, deadly voice. They will lock you in asylum. They will kill him. They will destroy everything. I don't care, I said. You must care? He exploded. Because I will not watch you throw your life into ruin. Josiah's voice broke through, soft and desperate. Sir, punish me. Do whatever you must. But please don't hurt her. Don't blame her. My father wheeled on him. Do you think I won't? Do you think I cannot sell you tomorrow? Send you south where she'll never see you again. My blood turned cold. Father, please. He held up a hand. Enough, Josiah. Go to your room. Lock the door. Do not leave it until I summon you, sir, now. Josiah rose, bowed his head, and walked out. The door closed behind him with a weight that crushed something inside me, alone with my father. I felt smaller than I ever had. He walked to the window, stared out at the winter fields, and spoke in a voice drained of color. I gave you to him so you would be protected. Not so you would. His voice cracked. Not so you would love him. You shouldn't have chosen someone kind, I said, my voice breaking. Someone gentle. Someone thoughtful. Love was inevitable. He turned, eyes glistening with frustration. You think love is enough? You think society will allow this? You are a white woman. He is black. He is enslaved. What you feel is against the law, against custom, against reason. Reason never gave me anything, I whispered. Josiah did? My father sank into a chair as if his bones could not support him. For the first time in my life, he looked defeated. What do you want from me? He asked. Tell me. Accept us, I said. Or if you can't, then at least don't tear us apart. He rubbed his face with both hands. If I do nothing, you will both be destroyed. If I separate you, I destroy you another way. There is no good option. There is one, I said softly. Free him. Let us leave. Let us go north. He stared at me for a long time. The ticking clock felt like a drum beat in the silence. Finally he spoke. I need time. I need to think. Hope flickered. Small, fragile, but real. I am not promising approval, he warned, rising slowly. But I will not sell him today. Or tomorrow. Or next week. I will think of a solution that does not end with either of you dead. Father. He raised a trembling hand. Do not thank me yet. I am trying to save you both. God help me. I don't know how. But give me time. He stepped toward the door, paused, and looked back at me with a face carved from fear and love in equal measure. This cannot continue in Virginia, he said. Not safely. Not ever. He left me standing in the quiet library, my heart pounding, tears blurring the room around me. Somewhere in the house, Josiah was locked behind a door, waiting for whatever fate my father would decide. I felt at once terrified and fiercely hopeful. The storm had broken. The world had found us, but for the first time, my father had not chosen society over me. He had chosen time. And time was hope. My father took 2 months to decide our fate. 2 months where the air in Whitmore estate felt like thin glass, ready to shatter at the smallest mistake. Josiah and I lived carefully, as if breathing too loudly might change my father's mind. We met only when necessary. We maintained distance whenever eyes were near. But in the stolen moments when our hands brushed or our eyes met, I felt a quiet promise. We would face it together. Late in February 1857, my father summoned us both to his study. He did not sit behind his desk as usual. Instead, he stood near the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back. His expression a mixture of fear, resolve, and something like grief. I sat in my chair, my heart pounding. Josiah stood beside me, stiff with nerves, his massive hands trembling just slightly. "I have made my decision," my father said, his voice steady but heavy. "There is no way for you two to remain in Virginia, nor anywhere in the South." His gaze moved slowly between us. "Your safety here is impossible. Your relationship, impossible. And if anyone suspects more than duty between you, they will destroy you both." My breath caught. This sounded like the beginning of a separation, but, he continued, "I will not tear you apart." Josiah inhaled sharply, as if he had forgotten how to breathe. Then my father spoke the decision that would rewrite both our lives. "I will free Josiah, formally, legally, irrevocably." For a moment, the room seemed to tilt. I gripped the arms of my chair. Josiah's knees nearly buckled. "You will no longer be property," my father said to him. "You will be a free man, able to travel, able to work for yourself, and able to protect Eleanor without fear." Josiah's voice cracked. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," my father said, raising a hand. "There is more." He then turned to me. "Eleanor, you cannot live here unmarried. The law won't allow it. And I will not send you into the world alone. So I am arranging something unprecedented." He paused as if steadying himself. "A legal marriage. Between you and Josiah." My hand flew to my mouth. Josiah stared at my father with disbelief, so raw it hurt to witness. "There is a minister in Richmond," my father explained, "a man sympathetic to abolitionist ideals. He will marry you quietly. He will not ask questions that cannot be answered." Josiah blinked hard, and a tear slipped down his cheek. Quickly brushed away before he could be seen as weak. "And after the marriage," my father continued, "you will leave. You will go north to Philadelphia. I will give you money enough to begin a new life. Letters of introduction to abolitionists who will help you settle. You will live as husband and wife, legally and safely, far from the reach of Virginia's laws." For a long moment, none of us spoke. I was crying silently. Josiah was breathing in short, shaking bursts. My father stood with his jaw tight, holding back a lifetime of fear and love. "Are you certain?" He asked me gently. "If you take this path, there is no going back. It will be hard. You will be shunned by many. You will not have the comforts you have known." I reached for Josiah's hand openly, unashamedly. His fingers closed around mine with a tenderness that steadied my heart. "Yes," I said. "I am certain." Josiah's voice was low, but it burned with devotion. "Sir, I will spend my life making sure she never regrets choosing me." "I swear it." My father nodded. "Then we begin." The following week was a blur of preparations. Lawyers were discreetly summoned to write Josiah's manumission papers, documents stamped and witnessed with legal seals that declared him a free man. My father oversaw every detail. When the papers were placed in Josiah's hands, he held them as though they were holy scripture pages that transformed his entire existence with ink. And signatures. Then came the day of our wedding. It was not a lavish ceremony. No church bells. No guests. No white dress. Only a quiet minister in a nearly empty Richmond church. My father as witness, and a soft yellow glow from the afternoon sun. Josiah looked terrified and reverent all at once. When he spoke his vows, his deep voice trembled, and he struggled not to cry. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, he exhaled a breath that sounded like freedom. On March 15th, 1857, we left Virginia in a private carriage my father arranged. Our belongings fit into 2 trunks, books, clothes, a few tools from the forge, and the precious freedom papers Josiah carried close to his chest. At the edge of the estate, my father embraced me fiercely, as if trying to memorize me. Write to me, he said. Tell me you are safe. Tell me you are happy. I will, I promised. He turned to Josiah. Take care of her. Sir, Josiah said with quiet conviction, with my life. My father nodded once, stepped back, and watched as we rode away from the only home I had ever known. We crossed Virginia, then Maryland, then Delaware. Every mile took us farther from danger and close to the unknown. Josiah kept expecting someone to stop us, to challenge him, to question the papers he carried. But no one did. When we finally crossed into Pennsylvania, the land of freedom, Josiah took a shaking breath, leaned back and whispered, We made it. And for the first time, without fear, I reached for his hand in broad daylight. He held it tightly, his thumb brushing my knuckles as the carriage rolled north toward the future we had dared to imagine. We were free. We were married. We were together, and the life waiting for us would be nothing like the one we left behind. Philadelphia did not welcome us with fanfare, but it welcomed us with possibility, and after everything we had risked, that was enough. The city was loud, crowded, alive with people from every corner of the world. There were horse carts rattling over cobblestone streets, merchants shouting prices, children weaving through crowds, and smells of bread, coal smoke, and rain drifting through the air. It was nothing like Virginia, but it was a place where Josiah could walk freely beside me, where no one bowed their head at his approach, where we were not forbidden by law from being together. It was imperfect, but it was ours. The abolitionist contacts my father had written to members of the Mother Bethel community helped us find a modest apartment in a neighborhood where free black families lived alongside poor white immigrants. We were an unusual couple, yes, and there were whispers, curious glances, even disapproval. But no one dragged Josiah away. No one called the sheriff. No one tried to tear us apart. For the first time in our lives, our love was not a crime, just a curiosity. With the money my father had given us, Josiah opened a small blacksmith shop. Freeman's Forge, our name, carved by his own steady hand into a wooden sign that hung proudly above the door. At first, business was slow, but Philadelphia needed strong hands, and Josiah's strength was unmatched. Within a year, he had more work than he could manage alone. He forged tools, repaired wagons, shaped metal hinges and gates. I handled the accounts, the clients, the books, and the scheduling. The education my father gave me, once dismissed by Virginia society as wasted on a crippled girl, became the backbone of our business. And slowly, brick by brick, we built a life. In November 1858. Our first child was born, a son we named Thomas after my father's middle name. I held him in my arms, tiny and perfect, and cried for an hour. Josiah, the giant with hands that could bend iron, held our son as if he were made of spun sugar. Seeing that enormous man cradle a newborn was the most beautiful sight I had ever known. More children followed. William in 1860, Margaret in 1863, James in 1865, Elizabeth in 1868. 5 children with skin, tones ranging from pale ivory to warm copper, with my eyes in Josiah's gentle smile. They grew up in a world where their parents' love was unusual but not forbidden, where their existence was not considered a crime. We raised them to read, to think, to challenge injustice, to value kindness above all else. During these years, Josiah invented something remarkable, an orthopedic metal brace designed to attach to my legs and waist. He had been studying medical texts, sketches of gait devices, and experimenting with metal supports for months. In 1865, he brought me the finished braces, polished and fitted to my shape. With their help and Josiah's steady hands, I stood up. Then I took a step. And another. For the first time since I was 8 years old, I walked. I cried. Josiah cried. And our children clapped and laughed, their voices echoing through our home as I took shaky steps across a rug worn by years of small feet running. You always walked, Josiah whispered against my hair. Your legs just needed help remembering how. My father visited us once in 1862. And again in 1869. He met his grandchildren, saw our home, sat in Josiah's forge while our youngest clung to his arm. He saw that we were not merely surviving, we were thriving. By then, he no longer looked at Josiah as a dangerous mistake. He looked at him as the man who had saved his daughter's life and happiness. Before he died in 1870, he sent me a final letter. His handwriting was shaky, his ink fading, but his words were clear. Giving you to Josiah was the smartest decision I ever made. What I believed would protect you gave you love. You were never unmarriageable. Society was simply blind. I am leaving this world with peace, knowing you are cherished. Josiah and I grew old together. Our hair silvered, our children married, our grandchildren filled the house with noise and joy. Freeman's Forge expanded into a larger shop. Our sons helped run it, and our daughters helped to manage its books. We lived the kind of life neither of us had dared to imagine in Virginia. I died on March 15th, 1895, 38 years to the day after we left Virginia. Pneumonia took me quietly. My last words were whispered into Josiah's hand. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for making me whole. Josiah died the next morning. The doctor said it was his heart. But our children knew the truth. He could not live in a world where I did not exist. We were buried side by side in Eden Cemetery in Philadelphia. Our shared headstone reads, Elellanena and Josiah Freeman married 1857, died 1895, love that, defied the impossible. Our children grew into remarkable adults. Thomas became a physician. William became a civil rights lawyer. Margaret became a teacher. James became an engineer. Elizabeth became a writer who preserved our story for the world in 1920. Elizabeth published Against All Odds, the story of Elellanena and Josiah Freeman. The world learned the truth about the girl society cast aside, and the man they called a brute, about how a desperate father's radical act created a love story that reshaped generations. That our legacy is not one of tragedy. It is one of courage, defiance, and the love so powerful that even the hardest boundaries of a cruel world could not destroy it. And that is how our story ends, not with loss, but with triumph, a reminder that love, once found, can change everything.